Welcome into Unbreakable, a mental wealth podcast with Jay Glazer. And I'm so excited for our guest today because not only am I working with him this week, he's a former NFL executive, but also he's coming on to really open up about his mental health and mental wealth journey over the last couple of years. And the first time he's really opening up about this. So really excited to dive in. But before I get to him, if you're like many people, you may be surprised to learn that 1 in 5 adults in this country experienced mental illness last year. Yet far too many fail to receive the support they need. Carolyn Behavioral Health is doing something about it. They understand that behavioral health is a key part of whole health, delivering compassionate care that treats physical, mental, emotional, and social needs in tandem. Carolyn Behavioral Health, raising the quality of life through empathy and action. Welcome into Unbreakable, a mental wealth podcast with Jay Glazer. I'm Jay Glazer, and I will be working with this man all week here for the NFL draft. We're hosting it for Fox Sports Radio. Did it last year as well. He's a personal friend who we've been friends for a long time. He's a former general manager of the Arizona Cardinals, Steve Keim. And Steve, I'm going to welcome you in. And we have a lot of things to talk about, things that you haven't talked about in your journey. So I'm really excited for, your vulnerability and for you to be able to tell people what your journey has been like. But before we hit that, let me give you a proper welcome. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing great. Yeah, just doing great, Jay. It's it's been a long time coming. I've talked about this podcast, and certainly something we've talked about over the years, and I think it's the right time.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I think, look, every time we've been through things in life, I kind of refer to them as things we've overcome, and our story and the things we've overcome. That's our equity in life. It's not the money we make. It's the thing that we've overcome that we continue to improve on, that we can pass on to others also. Every time, Unbreakable is something that almost broke me, didn't, and I came through the other side of that tunnel stronger as a result, and I could use that for the rest of my life.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And I think, Jay, you taught me a lot about mental health and some of the things that come with it. Obviously, over the past 2 years, I've gone through quite a bit. And, really, I think one of the things that is really hard to talk about is number one is asking for help. You have to show you're vulnerable enough to ask for help, and obviously that's a big issue. But at the same time, I think what's really important is my whole life and my whole life as an executive, as a football player, you're always taught to be tough, to not show your weakness, and that's really the opposite of what you go through in mental health. You try to be a proud person, you try to be a protected. You want to protect yourself to a degree, but at the same time, once you become vulnerable, once you be able to let your guard down, that's when I think you can make growth in life.
So, Steve, I want to go back here. Obviously, you were the general manager of the Arizona Cardinals. You were, were you? I don't know whether you were proper term. Were you fired as GM? You have mutual parting of the ways. I don't know what that is.
Yeah,
but it happened when you were in rehab, right?
Yes. Yeah. I went to a treatment center. I went to it was called the Meadows. It's a phenomenal facility in Wickenburg, Arizona, and really world renowned. But it's an amazing center that it's a 45-day inpatient facility, and it'll cover anything from food addiction, substance abuse, anything, anxiety, depression, which I had a big problem with. And it's a great place to go and reset. You're in there for 45 days, Jay. You don't have a phone, you don't have music, you don't have anything. All you're doing is you're in there and you're really trying to reset yourself and trying to make yourself a better person and trying to understand what happened to you that put you in that position.
Well, let's go back. I want to go back in time here because there was, you were working with the Cardinals, and this happened during the season where you went to rehab during the year. So I want you to kind of take us, lead up to us where you knew, hey, you were kind of going off the rails, what it was for, and fill our listeners in. Take us on your journey.
Well, if you can remember that summer prior to the season, we had just done Kyler Murray's contract, which was a stressful time for myself, trying to get that done and making sure that we had that contract to finish before the season started, or I should say before training camp started. And then at that point in time, there was a lot of pressure on us, to be able to pay Kyler that kind of money. And we were coming off a season where we had just won 11 games and went to the playoffs, and there was a lot of pressure. And, I just felt like over time, Jay, after we got that contract done during training camp, I just started to notice that something was wrong, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it. The people around me, my loved ones, and certainly family members, people that I worked with, they could tell something was wrong as well. And I think you and I even had some long talks about it. And that's what's the scary part about it, Jay, is my whole life I had never dealt with mental health issues. I was always a happy-go-lucky person. So to be put in that position for the first time, it was overwhelming. I didn't know what was wrong. I was sad. Here I am making the most money I've ever made in my life, more than I could ever imagine making as a young man, living my dream as a general manager, and I was still unhappy. And so then not only that, Jay, as you can imagine, now you're living the dream, you're making that kind of money, the guilt and the shame that comes with that. It's I know it sounds funny to say, but you're sitting there telling yourself, what is wrong with you? I'm sitting there trying to ask myself, what's wrong with you? Just get out of this funk. And it was not easy to do, and I could not sort of I couldn't get out of it, and it just got darker and darker. I got more depressed, and really the culmination of what really happened, that probably was the worst part of it, was my inability to sleep. I got to a point where I couldn't even shut my brain off, so I couldn't sleep. I was having to take I was taking Xanax, I was taking Ambien just to sleep. And after you go through a treatment center like the Meadows, you realize in some ways, they say Xanax and Ambien, some of those sleep help drugs, they can really, really cause problems. And it can really become addictive and can put you in a tough spot. I mean, I got to a point where if I didn't take an Ambien or Xanax to go to sleep, there was no way I was going to sleep that night.
Look, you're in a space now also. You and I've talked about this a lot. We go through a lot of the same things. I've had the same issues. I'm a clinical insomniac. I'm clinical depression, anxiety, ADHD, bipolar, you name it, I got it, right? Had to go big and everything. But I want to get back to something you said, and this is something, and you and I are being honest. I called you to my house at one point during this time, and I had a pseudo intervention, if you will, right? Like, hey, Steve, you've had some fun in the past, but this is a different level. And what you brought up to me then was the guilt that, man, my dream has come true, and why am I so miserable? Instead of just dealing with the misery itself, now you're dealing with the misery of the guilt because of how you feel. And, that's a hard road to get out of.
Yes. And quite frankly, not only that, Jay, one thing I learned at the Meadows, which was a great learning lesson for me in the treatment centers, sometimes for guys like ourselves, or type A and alpha males, guys who are so driven to be the best, it can become a real predicament whenever you get into a situation where, when is it enough? And, that's kind of how it was for me. When can you make enough money? It's not enough. How many cars do I need? How many houses do I need? How many things do I need? How many suits do I need? How many watches do I need? Just nothing was gratifying anymore either.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like I always say, our wallets are not antidepressants. And people, I've been on both sides, because I've been broker than broke. I was making $9,500 a year for the first 11 years of my career living in New York City. So I understand that part of, hey, my bill, which bill's going to get turned off this month, which every month bills got turned off. I just had to make sure my cell phone, didn't get turned off. At the same time, I've been very wealthy and blessed in my life. And, what I realized was almost a hard thing for me to realize when I did really make it. And I remember I was standing on the football field at Fox NFL Sunday. I'm making more money I ever made in my life. I'm biggest fame I could ever have. It's the height of my career with everything. Broken the biggest story of all time in Spygate. Doing ballers, and I'm standing on the football field, and I'm like, damn, this is supposed to be rainbows and unicorns. It's not. Right? It's not. And that's hard to deal with. And then you realize, all right, well, over time, I've realized as hard as I've worked out and making it, I've got to work just as hard and trying to somehow get myself to find that happiness from the inside out.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, Jay, I told my mother when I was 9 years old I was going to be a general manager in the NFL. So I was laser focused my whole life. That's all I was going to do, and accomplish those goals. And at the same time, again, the amount of guilt and shame that came with the lack of happiness in that position was really, really, really hard to deal with. And it was over time. My first 5 years, when I hired Bruce and we won over 50 games in 5 years, I'm two-time executive of the year. I think I'm really good at this thing. I'm getting a big head. I'm proud. I'm pretty good at this, right? And then all of a sudden the world comes to an end, and it's like Carson Palmer retires, Bruce Arians retires. We go through some tough times. I get a very public DUI, which was also something that I always had a hard time forgiving myself for. And you learn at a place like the Meadows, until you can forgive yourself for some of your mistakes, you're going to have a really hard time moving forward.
And also, look, you got the DWI, and the drinking continued after that. That must have been quite a wrestling match for you.
Yeah, because you're always sort of in the mindset of how can you determine whether it's a problem? Is it social? Is it, what we learned at the Meadows, man, and I thought this was a great lesson. People aren't addicted to drugs and alcohol. They have life problems, and those are your escape.
So tell me, I want to get back now to the journey itself. So you realize things are kind of coming off the rails for you. Tell me like the scariest part of coming off the rails, and then tell me how it got to in the middle of the season. Okay, I got to go to rehab. I can't continue being the GM right here.
The scariest part was, I think once we got to like November of that season, you go home, you're at home, obviously, being divorced and away from my kids is tough enough. But then at the same time, when you're home at night, and you come home from the job and you're trying to decompress, instead of watching a TV show to sort of come down, or maybe even having a cocktail, I got to the point where I didn't want to do any of that. I could not wait to take an Ambien or a Xanax or both to go to bed, because for me, that was letting the pain go. Does that make sense?
Gives you a break.
As soon as I could get to bed and make myself go to sleep, that was my ability to shut the world off.
Right. It gives you a break from the pain.
The problem is, Jay, is the next morning you woke up and the pain was still there. Didn't go away.
Yeah, that's hard.
And that's when I knew, when you couldn't enjoy life, when I felt like life wasn't, a lot of fun anymore, where I was having to go medicate to go to sleep to, again, stop the pain.
But I still want you to come back to what was the impetus. Like, there had to have been a day you were like, I'm going to rehab. Was it the team that sent you, or was it your decision?
No, leading up to it, I had enough people, again, friends, family, coworkers. Michael Biddle even our owner came and sat with me multiple times and said, hey, just, you just don't seem like yourself. And I didn't know what it was, but I also didn't try to hide from it. I told him straight up, yeah, I'm not doing good. I don't know what's wrong with me. And, he was great, supportive, here for you. But yet at the same time, again, there's a difference between acknowledging and saying, hey, I don't know what's wrong with me and I'm not perfect, versus I really need some help.
Right.
And again, that at the treatment center is the number one thing that they emphasize, is making sure that if you have problems out there, I don't care who it is, whatever your problems may be in life, ask for help. That's the vulnerability that's important.
How scary was it to go in the middle of the season and say, man, this is you had to have thought to yourself, wow, this is a career killer if I do this?
Well, number one, after 10 years of being a GM, it's sort of ran its course to the point where it's like, okay, something's got to change here, or I'm going to die, quite frankly. And, I think that it was like, I knew it was what was best for me. But when you still enter that treatment center, the first couple of days, you're in a little bit of denial, thinking you're different from anybody else there. Yet at the same time, after 2 to 3 weeks, you realize you're the same as everybody there. And that is, it builds a lot of camaraderie in there, man. It's interesting, so many different walks of life, and people that you meet in a treatment center like that are going through different things, that are going through different parts of adversity in their life. And it's a bonding time too, as well. And it was really, really strong. It was the best thing that could have happened to me, and certainly I needed it.
Are you if you look at your life right now, are you happier now, not being the GM, having gone through this, being able to dive into yourself more, or were you happier then when you were a GM?
Oh, so, I mean, much happier now.
Good. Love
Much
that.
happier. Yeah, no, I mean, and again, when the paychecks will stop coming and the fans stop screaming, there's certainly a uh, evolution of life that changes for you. Things slow down and you miss certain parts of your life in the past, but at the same time, you can finally again appreciate the small things. As we said, at a point in time, how many cars, how much money,
Right.
whatever it is, how many watches. Now, to go on a walk and to see a beautiful day and appreciate that changes everything.
Yeah. No, tell me. So when you're in rehab and Michael Bidwell comes and, you're again, I don't know were you fired or was there a mutual parting? I don't know what the,
Well,
I don't know
I
what
went to
the,
treatment. I went to the treatment center, and he and I talked, and we both agreed. Just that after I went to the treatment center, and I thought about going back to work,
right.
um, in my heart and in my stomach, I couldn't fathom going back into that office.
Hmm.
Um, and we both just thought it was best for the organization to move forward, and still love the organization and appreciate everything the Cardinals did for me. I was there for 25 years.
Well, my point is it happened while you were in rehab, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I was
Which is
in
wild.
rehab. Yeah. I was in the treatment center, and we talked on the phone, and he just said, "Hey, listen, we got to do something here. What do you want to do? How do you feel?" And because I went to the treatment center, I was able to think logically and to be able to understand where am I really at in my life, and to be honest with myself
Right.
versus trying to say, you know what? I want to just go back and kid myself and think that I'm going to be able to jump right back in the saddle here again and handle all this stress and the pressure that comes with the job.
So you have a big personality, right? You and I always go, Clay, we do this whole thing, right?
Yep.
I
Yep.
have had a lot of fun.
Yep.
What are the stressors and pressures to be that character? Like I always say, I created this character, the Glaze, right? To really hide all my shit from all these years. And I
Yep.
created this big, great, and so in a way, all my pain did allow me to build up this character, which I am a big part of the character, but allowed me to build this character to have a lot of success in my dream job. But at the same time, over the last couple of years now, I've tried to figure out a balance where I don't have to be the Glaze around everybody else.
Yep.
I just be Jay Glazer, and be
Yep.
happy with that. Tell me your wrestling match with that.
That was the number one thing I had to identify at the Meadows is I had to realize I had spent the majority of my adult life not knowing who I was, truly who I was. Okay. And my identity was Steve Keim, the executive, the GM, the fun guy, right? And essentially, Lays, I was wearing a mask. And that's what we talked about at the Meadows is you wear this mask and you become this person who's almost like a chameleon. You can adapt to any sort of social structure you're in. You can be the fun guy. You can be entertaining. Yet at the same time, there were parts of me that are dying inside as this sad little young kid, you know, we're sensitive and I can cry at, certain things. But no, you're this tough guy. You're the Glaze. You're Steve Keim. You're the executive of the year. And that's not who we are. And it's a mask. It's wearing a mask is what I call it throughout your adult livelihood. And it's really running from your reality.
See, I could tell you from knowing you, and I think I don't know if I've said this to you or not, but I speak for me, and I know I speak for also it's the same opinion of a lot of your friends. We've talked about it. We love Steve Keim way more than we love that big character.
Right.
We love the guy that does sit there and cry. You came to my house one time.
Yeah.
I kind of got after you about something. You cried, and then and then when I also called you over saying, "Hey, this ain't fucking like you, dude. What's going on here?" Same thing.
Right.
That's the dude we love. But you're a very loyal friend. You're sensitive as shit. You are, man. I know anytime I call someone, your fucking ass will be there for me in 2 seconds. You don't have to be that huge personality, and that's the dude we love the most.
Yeah.
And I hope you realize that.
Well,
You don't have to put on a show when we go out somewhere.
That's been one of the fun, refreshing things about the last probably year and a half is I haven't been around that guy much, and it's been fun. It's less stressful. It's everything's certainly more authentic, and life's more authentic.
Right.
And when life can be more authentic and you can enjoy the little things, the relationships, the times you and I could sit on your balcony and overlook the beach and be like,
Right.
here we are, two schmucks from the Northeast. Can you believe this is our life?
Thank you,
That's
God
the
moment.
simple
Yep.
things
Yep.
those
Yep.
are the simple things that we appreciate. And I come to a point now where it's like, you know what? If you stop appreciating all those special moments like that, then something's wrong.
What as a general manager, what are the most stressful things that you realize, oh man, this I need a drink because of this, or I got to do, the things that really drove you the craziest, and hurt and really kind of attacked you from the inside out.
Well, the general manager is a tough position because, you know, listen, Jay, you and I both want to be liked. Everybody wants to be liked. And to be a general manager in the National Football League, I would have to say you definitely are not the kind of person that wants to win a popularity contest because half the time the players are not happy with you because of their contracts. You have to deal with coaches' contracts, so they're not always happy with you. You want to try to make the owner happy, which is not always easy to do. You want to make sure the coaches are happy with the players you're giving them, which is not easy to do. And everybody's underpaid and don't have enough. And most people don't have enough director level titles. They're not getting pushed up the ranks as fast. So you're never really in a position where you feel like, you're a likable guy. You got to make a lot of tough decisions and have to deal with a lot of conflict. And it's extremely stressful. I mean, the kind of things, again, that keep you up at night because of the decisions you have to make ultimately, which can affect people's livelihoods. I mean, whether you're having to let people go, those sort of things. But at the same time, like it's a tough position because, again, you're trying to make everybody happy. And that can't be the mindset that you have. You have to do what's best for the organization moving forward.
Plus, for people out there who don't know, it's not just about getting players. Like basically, you got to now deal with every single thing in that building comes across your desk. So family issues, agent issues, marketing issues, all people cry. And you find out the crux of what make people go of everybody in that building. So as I like to say,
Yes.
you find out everybody's fucked up.
Yes.
Right? You find out how fucked up everybody really is, and you got to deal with it. And as a GM, it's not like you went to school for this. There's no guidebook. Hey, how do I deal with this guy coming in saying that, man, his wife just cheated on him, but she's extorting him for this amount, but he did this, right? There's no guidebook for this stuff.
No doubt. And that's what I did. I mean, Jay, listen, as soon as the press conference was over, it was so funny that in 2013,
what press conference?
The press conference in 2013 when they named me general manager.
Okay.
It was so funny because it's like my whole life I had worked to become the general manager, right? And I remember walking up to my office and putting my head in my hands and going, "What the fuck do I do now?" There's no book, right? There's nothing that tells you what to do in those situations. But then you just sort of have to fly by the seat of your pants and do what you know is sort of expected next, which luckily for me, it was Bruce Arians and Carson Palmer, which led to a good run for 5 years.
Would you say you're drinking and you're you say drug use, right? From trying to go to sleep and whatever else you haven't done. Was it just the drinking and the night meds, or were there more?
No, it was the night meds. It was
Okay.
well, it was those Xanax and the Ambien, which again, I don't want to speak out of turn, but the people at the Meadows, they make it sound like that those drugs are worse than street drugs, whether it's marijuana, heroin, cocaine. They make it sound like those drugs like Xanax and Ambien are really, really problems.
So are you still battling these? Do you say you have it under control? Are you?
I haven't used Xanax or Ambien since the Meadows.
Great. Are you? So this guy who's now gone through all this.
Yep.
This version of Steve Keim. What would you say to Steve Keim in your last year at the Cardinals, who's kind of going off the rails, or when it first started?
I think number one, try to find healthier ways to approach adversity and stress. But again, in those moments, it's easier said than done. Sometimes too, Jay, when you ask about being a general manager, some of the tough decisions you had to make, right? And the stress that came onto your plate, there were times where almost you felt alone too. Sometimes in life you have buddies that you can sort of circle up with and vent. There's some big decisions and private decisions you have to make that are stressful that you have to do alone in this business.
Hmm.
And you really can't vent to somebody else. You can't talk to anybody else. You can't worry about how you feel. And that puts you in a tough predicament, I think.
Hmm. What are you also you just mentioned there's healthier ways to deal with that stress. What are some of these healthier ways that you've now learned?
Yeah, certainly exercise, meditating. That's one thing we did at the Meadows. We did a lot of meditating. We did a lot of whether it was different forms of yoga, just a lot of self-help stuff, which are breathing techniques.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the breathing techniques that I learned there were phenomenal. I mean, to the point where, Jay, even with my lack of patience, even standing in a grocery line and almost losing my shit, where I have a word like Cabo, 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 and I can say in my mind and just sort of chill out and sort of realize, listen, you're in a line at a grocery store. Relax. It's okay.
Right. What advice would you give other general managers now? If you can call them now people are going to see this and go, oh, now we understand what's going on with Steve. And I would hope that you could be of service to them. So, hey, man, I got some advice for you here. What would you tell these guys?
Well, I mean, I think number one, I think you can identify this as well as I can. I think that there's a number of our friends who are out there doing the job that are going through a lot of the similar type things. I mean, I'm sure I wasn't alone. I can only tell you what I went through myself, but these guys have tough lives. They go through a lot of stuff. And I think more than anything is to be able to ask for help and to be able to identify more than anything, Jay, like anything else. The hardest part is identifying and to put yourself in a predicament where you can identify and you can be vulnerable enough to ask for help and to know it's okay to say, I have a problem.
Would you go, one of the things I always talk to teams about is, man, taking your therapist. I was telling you back then too, man, go talk to your therapist, right? But a therapist in the building, they only have to be there 3 days a week, which is, and there needs to be, I think, in my opinion, eventually the NFL has to evolve where you have several therapists, just like you have several strength coaches, several trainers, all that, several there, but they're tucked away in the back of the building. Like it's almost like taboo to go. If you were to if you were to be a GM again, what would you do to make it different where it's not so taboo to go talk to that therapist?
I want everybody to know that again, instead of what we've been taught our whole lives, don't show your pain, be tougher. It's the complete opposite. You're more of a man when you're more vulnerable, when you're more open, when you're more open to sort of battling your demons. Because again, that's the only way you're going to fix it. And that's the cool thing in life. They say the cool thing in life is to, well, that's not to blow all these things that are so hard to talk about off. The cool thing is to talk about them. And once you learn how to be able to be vulnerable and talk about things openly, you learn how quickly you can heal, because you won't be able to heal if you won't.
It's so funny. You're talking about being open and vulnerable, and we're taught not to show it. I'm the living contradiction to this, because I opened my MMA program, Unbreakable MMA 15 years ago, whatever it was. It used to be called MMA Athletics. And we've trained all these players, right? And have my gym Unbreakable. And our whole mindset there is, man, you don't show it. You don't show it. If I'm hurt, if I'm tired, you'll never fucking know, right? Our fighters don't take a stool in between rounds. You fuck up my arm, I ain't going to fucking let you know. And here I am now coming out with Unbreakable, the podcast and my book.
Yeah.
And I am now preaching the exact opposite of everything that I coach in sports. Man, be vulnerable, show it, make sure everybody knows. And man, they could both be accurate, but what we now have to do is really separate them. One is for your job, the other one's for life.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, here we are, two guys who we think are pretty tough guys, right? On the surface. Yet at the same time, here we are talking about how cool showing our weakness is.
No, not weakness, as vulnerability. It's not our weakness. Yeah.
No. I'm saying, but the old Steve, the old Jay, the old mindset of most is now I'm showing a weakness. It's not a weakness. Right.
In sports, and that's what in sports, okay, you can look at it that way. You look at it, hey, if you show you're tired, hey, I don't show I never like to use the term weakness anymore because of this, but it's more of the, hey, it's my job to break you. So if you don't know I'm tired or hurt, you'll never know. Right. But at the same time, if we don't show it in life, we're going to end up breaking in life. So that's what I'm trying to do now is really, I still coach the one way, but now I tell guys, hey guys, This is just for your competition. This is for
Right.
your sport or your fight. I need you to do the complete opposite in life if we want to be happiness and build ourselves from the inside out. And
That's exactly right.
And it's a different world we live in now, too, because back in the day when you made a decision, Steve, you didn't have a million people on social media telling you what a dumb shit you are. You just had, a couple of reporters and a couple of guys in your building, but not the whole world. And we're sensitive people. That shit bothers us, right?
Exactly. I know you're sitting here worried about the guy living in his mom's basement talking about what a shitty job you've done.
Right.
Like, what does this world come to?
And it affects us. It does. All those, every social media post, it still carries the same weight. You don't know who it is. It's still, and just because we're successful, folks, doesn't mean our feelings hurt any less. I'm sensitive as fuck. My feelings get hurt easily. Yes, absolutely.
Right. And it's funny, Jay, because over the years, being close with you, you taught me that and you showed me that. But there's a real, and this is to be straight honest with you, there is a real fine line in my opinion, in your ability to finally let go. You know what I mean? It's like you can preach and you can tell me and you can give me great advice about being open and vulnerable and all those different things, which you have done over the years. Okay. But until you get to your breaking point, or till you get to a point where you can identify and acknowledge your problems, it's really hard to let go because you're still going to be guarded.
But explain that more.
Like, for example, again, over the years, it's easy. It was easy to hear you say, here's what you need to do, or here's what helps me with my mental health issues, or here's some things I've learned along the way. Yeah, listen, I can take all that in and I can learn from it. But can I really, really adopt and live by those terms until I acknowledge, until I'm ready to let go? You have to completely let go. You can't hold back anymore. You can't stick your toe halfway in the water and be like, you know what, I'm doing some things to make myself better. Yeah, that's fine, but you're not committing your whole entire self to it.
I think it was great for you also, Steve. Like, what's helped me also is being of service, and you being open and vulnerable like this now. And I think you do, help out your others who are trying to get in this position. I think that'll give you some freedom as well. I
mean, again, as you and I talk, could I have ever imagined coming on a program like yours to talk about these kind of issues? No, I would have never, ever in my mind thought I could put myself in this position.
How do you feel now that you've done it?
Completely relieved. and it was funny because when I walked into the room to do it, I felt that sort of not anxiety, but sort of that a little bit of excitement actually to be able to tell my story. And hopefully my story helps someone else along the lines with as many lives as you saved. Maybe somebody else out there, maybe another general manager, maybe another athlete can say, you know what, here's just another guy that has had his issues along the way and was able to talk about it and to be open and honest.
I love that. You know what? People used to say to me all the time, hey, if you save one person, it's enough. And I used to be like, no, it's not. And you know what it is? It's one of the things I had to come really, because I am so driven and I am guilt ridden by things. And I used to look at it like, who have I not helped instead of who have I helped? So it's one of the things, just so you know, also I've had to work with is giving myself that grace of, hey, no, wait.
Yeah.
If I have helped one person, because I don't know the ripple effect there, that person may have helped a ton of people also. So I want you to give yourself that grace too. One person hears this, you help them, man, which you will, you absolutely will. You could put that on your resume of life from the big picture.
Yeah. And it's still, every day is a challenge, as you know. Yeah. I mean, it's, there are still days, Jay, that you still go through that it's, you still have to remind yourself, I have to forgive myself, because I do live with a lot of guilt and shame.
Yeah. No, you got to, well, what are you doing to get over that guilt and shame? You're still going to therapy, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
What else? Good.
No, just continuing to just do, again, healthy hobbies in life, whether it's, I just got my knee replaced. So a week ago. So that was a huge thing for me, because that was also another thing that when you're carrying that kind of physical pain, that can also attribute to some of these problems. Mm-hmm. So that was another step in the right direction.
Well, I'm proud of you for coming on. I want to switch gears here and we do have the draft coming up here and talk some other things. Hey, before I do that though, obviously your old team, they got a whole bunch of stuff going on here. your owner and Terry McDonough, and
Yeah.
tell me what your thoughts are on all that.
Oh, it's just unfortunate to me, because again, as I said, the stress that I carried, that I was trying to keep people happy in every sort of compartment. And that really would tear at you whenever you knew that people couldn't get along. And there were things that went on behind the scenes that maybe only I knew about or some others knew about, that they were just tough to know that I couldn't fix certain things, because I always felt like I was the kind of guy that my mentality was always, be part of the solution, not part of the problem, and keep everybody's attitude in the right direction, and roll your sleeves up at the door and check your ego there and that sort of thing. But it's unfortunate. We had a good run, and I'm still rooting for the organization because again, a lot of people that I care about.
All right, so on draft week, right, and people think you guys have your picks set like weeks in advance. I always try and tell, no, it's not how they do it. Tell me what you guys did. You do when did you get your board set?
Generally about 3 days before the draft.
Okay, folks, I want you to hear that. 3 days before the draft. So every time you hear that somebody has it, oh man, they're locked in at 20 at this guy, and they say it in February. They're not fucking locked in on February.
First of all, they have no clue who's going to be there at 20.
So you got your
and in February, when you think a guy's going to be there at 20, he usually goes about 8.
Right. So all right. So tell me how kind of lay out the week of, if you will. So do you guys take that final weekend off, and then
you take the final weekend off and you come back that week, and essentially your board is put together. Then, to me, I think most teams are doing it the same way in terms of ranking players 1 through say 120 or 200 for that particular team. That you would take these players in that particular order if the draft slid like that.
Okay.
And now all of a sudden it makes it pretty easy that you've already had these conversations between number 3 and number 4 on your board, and all of a sudden you're the 11th pick in the draft, and those 2 players are there. People don't get excited, because the hard part on draft day is to not allow the emotions to get ahead of you. To be able to say, listen, we did the work, we've had these conversations, and there's a logical reason why we're making this decision.
Right.
And that can be tough because the momentum in those rooms can get crazy on draft day.
So, I was in a room one time. I was in there with the Saints years ago, when Jim Haslett was head coach. And Saints, this was a later round pick, but they still had a guy on the board who was like number 8, but had all these freaking red flags. And this year, they know, man, we bring him into our room, he's going to fuck our place up, but he's the 8th best player on our entire board. Talk about that. It's still, I understand, because it's the ultimate risk reward. So I understand the talent end of it, but if you do have a million red marks in a guy, does it really matter what point you bring him in? He's going to fuck your locker room up.
Exactly. Have you seen those draft cards? They essentially look like, like a Christmas tree lit up in different colors. There's blue, there's red dots, there's yellow dots. And
there's a skull for guys you don't want to go near, right?
Exactly.
Hey, huge red X.
The perfect example for that for me was, I think we were picking the 26th or 28th draft pick that year. And we selected Robert Kimdichie. Now, Robert Kimdichie was, essentially from a skill set and a talent standpoint, one of the top couple players in the draft. But there was a list of a mile long of red flags that came with him. And it's sort of one of those deals that always taught me in my later years, if the red flag is there, and it's not only there, but it's with a blinking light at you, avoid. But that's the hardest part, man, is we get so enamored with these physical tools and the talent. And then you bring in coaches into some of these discussions, and these guys can coach anybody. These guys, I can get this guy right. Well, that's interesting. How come the 15 coaches before you couldn't get him right, but you're going to be able to coach him?
Right.
but now all of a sudden, then to Robert Kimdichie's, our defensive line coach said, during the draft meetings, I said, listen, Robert's got these issues. I'm concerned. I said, if we take this guy, we've got to be committed to obviously, the process and getting him to in every category with Robert, personally, professionally, everything. And the defensive line coach said, if we take this guy, he can live in my basement, right? That same defensive line coach brought Robert into my office the next year and said, I can't coach this fucking guy.
Really?
Yes. And I sat back and I said, "What happened to your basement?" He must have had a flood. And you
That's
want to talk about
funny.
stress of like, you talk about stress of a general manager. You just took a guy in the first round and everybody said, "Listen, I will adopt this kid. I will make sure he gets to class." Right. And now all of a sudden, a year later, I can't fucking
Oh
coach
my
this guy.
God.
You wonder why I'm stressed out.
Right. All right. So the week of, let's go back. You come back in on Monday, let's say, right? And your board's set, right? And then what happens there? What kind of wrestling match happens from there? Or what's your next steps leading up to the draft,
Yeah.
these next 3 or 4 days?
Yeah, you'll generally get with analytics people, and you'll sort of generate some different mock drafts that takes you through a bunch of different scenarios. Not only scenarios where that pick falls a certain way, but then also trade possibilities.
So but you also have, are you one of the teams that used to have, uh, do you have everybody sitting around the table and they're all different teams, or you just use a computer to help it? I know a lot of people have, everybody has a mock draft and they kind of compare it together. What did you guys do?
We early on we went around the room with all our coaches and scouts prior to the draft and allowed them to be different teams.
Okay.
It became really unrealistic though, because then those people started picking guys that they liked, and it wasn't realistic to the order. So then we started to generate more analytics based lists off of, say, guys like yourself or Daniel Jeremiah's mock draft or somebody else that is reputable that you think could potentially happen.
So I don't. By the way, I don't do mock drafts. I never have. You know why?
Because you know the picks.
Yeah, because you tell me who you can fucking take, and you go, but Glaze, you can't say anything. So if I can't say anything, I'm not going to betray you, but I'm also not going to lie to the fans.
That's right.
So I can't put somebody out there that I know I'm lying to the fans. So years ago, I stopped doing mock drafts because I'm like, man, these guys. And then to your people probably don't understand my involvement in this, or my as an insider too. A lot of these guys will reach out to me and go, hey, this is who we want. Can we get him there? Or do we have to move? You've done that with me. Do we have to move
of course
this way or that way? Right. And, and I've had coaches send players for me to train to see if I could break them and see how they are and see if they're going to be able to see if they're going to pop off on their coaches.
And by the way, sometimes you're like the bearer of bad news. It could be like I'm sitting there and I'm like, please, we're picking a 38 in round 2. I'm thinking that's just, oh fuck, he's not going to be there.
Right.
And he'd be like, no.
I'm like no shot.
Don't tell me that.
I'm like, Steve, you got no chance. But at the same time, also, look, I trained a guy years ago, and I'm like, Steve, this guy, he's a receiver, he's movement tight end, he's a great human, man. And Steve, you ended up signing him on my recommendation. Yeah. He should have gone like the 5th round, but you're like, hey, if anything else, Glaze, I will I'll sign him an undrafted free agent. I think he's still in the league, right? 8-9 years later.
He lasted a number of years.
Ricky Seals-Jones, right? Yeah. Right? And he's still I think he's still in the league, but he's had a long career, and I couldn't get anybody to take a look at him except for you and I think Minnesota. And I'm like, guys, I've trained this guy for 3 or 4 months. I'm telling you, he'll be a pro for a long time in the league. He wants to be great. You know what I did with him, man? I ended up having him coach my son, because what I've learned, if you teach me something and I coach it and teach it to somebody else, I pick it up fast with my ADHD. And most of these players got ADHD. So if you do that, I'm like, hey, Ricky, hey, you're going to help Sammy out here. So if you teach Sammy that, like, I want you to teach Sammy what I taught you, and he would just pick it up. And, we could all learn in a different way. You just got to find out those ways that you learn. But
no question.
Yeah, but I'm like trying to hit you in like the 2nd round. Go get him. You're like, I'm not using a 2nd rounder on him, Glaze.
Easy, Glaze.
When do the calls start coming for trades that are, you really know, okay, I could really have a dance partner?
Honestly, you get some prior to the draft if they're going to be real players in the 1st round, but generally not until you're on the clock.
So you don't have like frameworks done?
Well, I should say, when you're 5 picks away from your pick, then you start calling teams. Hey, we see you have this pick. Consider 38 for 152 and 156.
When you traded for Hollywood Brown, how did that, like, when do those talks start?
That happened the night before the draft.
Night before. It was you calling them, they calling you.
I had called Eric DeCosta right around the combine time, because I started to think to myself that I wasn't going to be able to get a real receiver in that draft. I think we had the 24th pick, and I was right because they all went off the board prior to 24. And Eric said no, and the Ravens maintained no for quite some time until the night before the draft. And I think Hollywood put some pressure on them that he wanted out of there, and they decided to sort of allow him to go.
Were there any other? Was that the only receiver you were locked in trying to get, or were there others?
I know we had looked into a couple other receivers, but obviously his relationship with Kyler was big, and the fact that he was a speed guy, which we did not have speed at the time with D Hop being our ex receiver.
Was there you got any funny trade stories that almost happened but didn't?
Well, the D Hop trade was the funniest story just because it happened during the pandemic. So it was like me and Bill O'Brien did that trade.
DeAndre Hopkins, really.
Yeah. We did that trade, right before free agency started. And then I don't know if you remember this, but the pandemic happened and they stopped all of free agent travel. So they shut down free agency. So essentially me and Bill had agreed to this trade, which nobody knew other than ownership and myself and Bill O'Brien. So every day I'm waking up, first of all, during that period of time, you couldn't go to the office. So I'm like laying in my pool, hanging out, thinking to myself, did I really trade for DeAndre Hopkins? And we couldn't consummate the trade until we got a physical on both him and David Johnson, our running back. Well, that was a huge issue, obviously. So the whole time I'm thinking to myself, at some point in time when they find out that the Texans are trading D-Hop, they're going to murder Bill O'Brien. Right. And then he's going to get cold feet and he's going to pull out of this trade. But obviously good things never happened. And we were able to consummate the deal and they did eventually allow these guys to get physicals.
I do have one funny trade story is our good mutual friend Frank Caliendo one time calls you as John Gruden trying to trade for Kyler Murray and offering you Quinn Williams, and then called you as me that I had heard the story, right?
Yeah.
On draft day.
Frank's a man of many hats.
It was unbelievable, though. It sounded just like both of us.
And he did. And I told him, I see, for you to interfere with my job like that, you're a real sick human.
Just like him. Tell me the when you make that pick, that first pick, and this will be this and one question left. When you make that pick, is it utter joy? Is it anxiety? Is it both? What's the emotion when you call a kid and say, "Hey, we're choosing you in the first round"?
I think it's a little bit of everything. I think it's anxiety. I think it's fear. I think it's excitement. And generally, I would say probably most of the time, if you don't have the first pick in the draft or even a top 5 pick, I think a lot of times you like the player enough to think you were probably a little bit shocked that he got to you, say at 15, 17, 24, whatever it is. So you're pretty excited. But at the same time, it's a high pressure pick because obviously that should be the one that is a guaranteed starter. He's obviously a franchise type player, whether it's a quarterback or he's the real deal. He's a leader for your team. When in reality, you run the analytic studies and 49% of first round picks bust.
Right.
Which is humbling.
Give me. I do have one other question. Give me the coolest call you've made. Doesn't have to be first round. Anybody. Coolest call you made to tell somebody they've been drafted.
Honey Badger.
Oh, do tell.
Because he was sitting in the 3rd round, and I had brought him in for a visit. So again, here's a guy should have been a top 15 pick, but obviously had his issues at LSU.
Top 5 pick back then, yeah.
Yeah, had his issues at LSU, and for me, the feelings that I had, it was my first draft as a general manager. So this is 2013. So here I am saying there's no chance that I could ever take a chance on a guy like that, my first draft as a GM. And it got to be the 3rd round, and I got to know him personally and felt very comfortable with the person and the player. And felt like, NFL football would be a real deterrent for him to not go back to make any mistakes, and it was. He's done a phenomenal job, had a great career. And the call just itself, how emotional it was, the fact, him crying, him promising he would not let us down. And he certainly didn't.
No doubt, man. And, you think back also how how you evaluate guys. His problem was weed back then, which is now legal in half the states.
That's right.
And he's taken off from my sports because of weed.
That's right.
All right, final question, brother, and I'm really proud of you today.
You.
And you may have already mentioned it, but I ask this of every guest, so I have to ask it to you. Give me your unbreakable moment. That moment in your life, it could be specific, whatever it is, that could have broken you and should have and didn't. And as a result, you came through the other side of that tunnel stronger forever.
The day I walked in to the Meadows Treatment Center as the general manager of the Arizona Cardinals, knowing that changed everything in my life. Could have been for the good, bad, or whatever anybody else thought about it. But when I walked out that other end, 45 days later, I found out who Steve Keim was. I liked who he was. I embraced the things that he did in the past. I forgave him for the things he did in the past. And more than anything, I found a way to love him again.
Steve Keim, man, I am proud of you. That may be the answer I've been most proud of in the history of doing this podcast, man. I'm proud of you, brother.
I love you, man. I appreciate everything you've done for me.
I see that lip quivering, brother. Don't ready to cry here, dude. I'm proud of you, man. I'm really proud of you.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you, man.
You. And I cannot
proud to call you
this
friend.
draft with you. Proud to call you a friend, brother. Man, hey, it's our equity is all these changes that we make, man, and our experience we go through. I'm proud to walk this walk with you, brother.
You too, my man.
All right. Love you, buddy. Steve Keim.